I suffered with some serious chronic pain, inflammation, and today probably 90% of that is gone everywhere. But one of the things I had talked about in the past that was debilitating was my low back, and most of you have heard this story, so I don't want to dig down into it. But I was challenged in finding things, and I got to the point to where a really good friend of mine, actually a colleague friend of mine, he had practices, and a couple of things he did PRP, but he also did decompression and so forth, and so I had gone through I did everything: decompression, I did acupuncture, I did cryotherapy, chiropractic, you name it, I did it. And this friend of mine, I did decompression with him, and it still wasn't getting the job done, and debilitating towards affecting everything in my life. And I had to do something about it. And so one of the things I had done, ultimately what was I mentioned to you guys the biological that I did ultimately, but prior to that, what really was the most successful thing I did was my friend that did decompression. He said, you need to go speak with this guy that works with me. Okay, here he is, he does decompression, but he was working with Garrett up in Austin on this therapy that he was doing. And I said, well, tell me about it. He said, well, just go. So anyway, I went up there, and I met with Garrett, and he was very knowledgeable and took me through a lot of testing and so forth, helped determine where my imbalances were, my weaknesses. But I got to experience a very miraculous change in a very short period of time. I remember the first time I went, I had to put a pillow behind my back to drive to Austin, which is about an hour and a half. And I had to get out of I had to make 2 stops on the way up there because of the pain. And it was nice. The very first treatment I had with Garrett, I drove home. And I think I called him, the next day just to thank you. What you've done here has just been amazing. And so I was doing these treatments. I don't know how many I did, but Garrett remembers the story. But I told Garrett, I said, you really need to do something with your business. And he was always already developing things, but I wanted to be a part of that push and kind of help him. Here's where this can go with this. You need to get this out. And so I don't remember how we ran into each other again or what came up. I think KJ or Miranda had seen Garrett at a conference, and they came home and said, hey, this gentleman knows you. I said, yeah, I'd love for him to come. If he's at that point now where he's developed this equipment, I'd love him to come introduce it. So for some of you that are still actually dealing with chronic pain, or you're dealing with athletes that want to take it to another level, this is some pretty unique stuff. And so,
thank you, Dr. Webb, and thank you, everybody. It's an honor to be here. Having had experiences getting to know Dr. Webb in the past, it's very cool, and it's a tremendous honor to be here, part of the FPC Quarterly Mastermind. So thank you. My name is Garrett Salpeter. I'm here to present to you today our technology for faster healing and high performance. Quick little backstory. I grew up as an ice hockey player. I had several injuries of my own, and I was very, very frustrated with what I was told by the traditional medical, traditional orthopedic, traditional physical therapy worlds. And I always had in the back of my mind this sense that, I'm a human. We're all humans. We have this tremendous power to adapt and heal and grow and change and regenerate. And I had this sense, and that was just such a stark contrast to what I was being told. I was being told I needed Advil. I was being told I needed to rest. I was being told I needed surgery. And it was just really frustrating and kind of disempowering to me. And so in parallel, I was an engineer, physics major, going to be an engineer, ended up playing college ice hockey. And my last year, I had an experience with a functional neurologist where I had some torn ligaments in my wrist. I was supposed to have surgery and be out for 3 months. And by working with him and working from first principles neurologically in a way that finally resonated with me, we were able to heal the ligaments in 2.5 weeks. I was able to avoid surgery, and it changed the course of what I was doing with my life. So I ended up, as I was finishing my master's degree in engineering at the University of Texas in Austin, opened a facility 200 square feet in the back of a chiropractor's office, and since then it's grown from there over the last 10 years, and within the last couple of years We actually have been working to develop the technology that we now have and that I'm here to share with you. And that is called the NeuBe, which is an acronym for Neuro Bioelectric Stimulator. It is a type of electrical stimulation, and so I'm very often asked the question, well, why should I care? Why should I pay attention to it? I've seen electrical stimulation. I know it can do some things, but it usually doesn't do very much. And TENS units are just kind of like an electronic aspirin. They don't really fix anything, but they can block pain, stuff like that. So there's a big difference. There's actually several big differences in our technology compared to what's traditionally out there in this world. And one of the biggest differences is that most devices are alternating current, which has some very particular effects on the body and some major downsides, whereas ours is direct current. So in the images on the right of the screen, that top one, the signal going back and forth, that's alternating current, whereas ours is a pulsed direct current. It's engineered to most closely match the same signals that our bodies send naturally during movement, those same neurological signals, and so it allows us to have a very unique effect on the body and do things that you can't do with traditional devices. For instance, alternating current devices, because the signal goes back and forth, that's foreign to the body. Our bodies work on DC. Alternating current devices, AC devices, cause protective reactions within the body. They cause muscles to shorten, to contract, whereas ours can preferentially promote eccentric elongation of muscles. And that's very important for several reasons. One, for example, this gentleman here is a bodybuilder we worked with at our home office in Austin. He tore his pec. You can see the nasty, gnarly black and blue, all the bruising there in his left pec. And that's normally a 10 to 12 week injury to heal. One of the reasons it takes so long is that those protective contractions around there, the body's bracing all the tissues around that injury, and that's productive, if his pec is going to be attacked or hit, because it protects against that. But it's actually counterproductive for healing, for movement, and so in that regard, the body actually slows down its own healing process. So by getting our device into the mix very quickly, that's the machine's on him 2 or 3 days after the injury, we're able to eccentrically elongate all the tissues around it. So instead of shortening and bracing and blocking the flow of blood in and the flow of raw materials that can heal and repair the damage, we're opening up the pathways there so the body can send in the proteins, the raw materials to heal. It can remove all the waste products from the damage. And there's a healing process that has to happen. It's just able to go at the fastest rate possible because we've gotten all the other impediments out of the way. So in addition, eccentric contractions are very important and relevant for force absorption. Most injuries, like 95 to 99% of injuries, happen on the deceleration phase of movement. So it's not taking off for a jump, but it's actually landing, or it's stopping, going in this direction in order to turn and go in this direction. It's that stopping and deceleration. The more force that muscles can absorb, the more resistant someone will be to injury. The more force muscles can absorb, the more those muscles will protect an injured area while it heals. And so this is very important for accelerating recovery from all injuries and surgeries, and very important for teaching proper movement patterns so the body can be more resistant and resilient. Important point here with eccentric contractions, and one of the reasons this is so valuable and beneficial, is that when you load tissues eccentrically, that's a strong signal for tissues to regenerate along the lines of force that they're being loading, along those same vectors. And so oftentimes when you have injury, the body's going to lay down scar tissue, and that's kind of random. It's going in all different directions. Whereas if we can get proper eccentric loading, more of the tissue is going to orient along the appropriate lines of force, and you're going to be left with better quality tissue at the end of the recovery process. Another difference in our technology compared to everything else that's out there is that alternating current and traditional devices are hijacking the motor system. They're causing muscles to contract, an external signal causing a muscle to do something just the same as it would if you're lifting weights. And in hundreds and thousands of reps in the gym, you can make a difference in someone's strength, in someone's movement, in someone's muscle mass. You can accomplish things. In contrast to that process, what I'm suggesting here is a different paradigm and a more efficient way. Instead of having to do hundreds or thousands of reps to change a movement pattern, if instead you are able to change the sensory, afferent, environmental inputs to someone's brain, you can very, very quickly, in a few minutes, change how they're functioning. You can teach their brain to make better decisions on its own, to improve movement patterns. to really make significant change very, very quickly. So it's a much faster process. And to understand this really is a new paradigm. And I like to start, when discussing concepts along these lines, I really like to start with this notion that we have the power. And by that I mean we all have more strength, more speed, more flexibility, more potential to heal and recover and adapt, more energy. We have all of these things inside of us. Our brains just limit us, they govern us, they restrict us from displaying all of those qualities for various reasons. And rather than putting in a anti-inflammatory pill, what I'm encouraging us to do is tap into the power that's already inside of us. So the things that limit us from displaying these faster recovery times, from displaying peak physical or cognitive performance, oftentimes our brains limit us as a safety protective mechanism. Our brain's number one priority is survival. Our brains want to protect us. Our brains want to limit us from using too much energy because there might be a famine tomorrow. They don't want us to spend too much energy to build extra muscle. All these things that limit us come from inappropriate, I would say, patterns that can be changed and addressed and improved. Another illustration of this concept is in this protection and performance continuum. So when the brain perceives that there's too much threat in the body, and this gets into some of the modern understanding of pain from neuroscience that's developed in the last 10 or 15 years. A lot of times pain is not necessarily a response to damage, but it's a response to perceived threat. And so by tapping into this difference between sensory and motor side of the application here, by tapping into sending the appropriate sensory signals, we can change the internal environment, change their perception of threat, and move someone from the side, from the protective state where they're going to have pain, they're going to have excessive tension as another protective mechanism. We can move them over to the other side, the side of high performance and faster healing, where people are faster and stronger, more supple or flexible, they're adaptable, they heal faster. Another area that we've kind of touched on so far, where the difference is between this technology and what's already out there, another area of significant difference is in the effect on function. So because alternating current devices are foreign to the body, they're causing muscles to co-contract and fight against each other. You're teaching, if you're doing this with a patient, you're teaching that patient to move as if you were driving a car, hitting the throttle and the brake pedal at the same time. So you're teaching people to resist their own movements, and that can be very detrimental. It can teach people inefficient patterns. It can reinforce the very same patterns that lead to pain and injury in the first place. So in contrast to that, because of the direct current, the unique effect it has, how we use this in our protocols, we're able to preferentially promote effective coordination between opposing muscles, and this makes a big difference where the rubber meets the road. So these are a couple examples of changes people are making in just their first session using our device. So on the left here, this gentleman had chronic back pain for over a year. He had been stuck, couldn't side bend beyond that. In one session, in about 10 minutes of live time on the newbie device, he was able to increase his pain-free range of motion pretty dramatically. Likewise, this woman here had knee pain for several years. She couldn't squat below that level in the first picture there. In one session, she's able to increase her pain-free range of motion pretty dramatically. Similar experience to what Dr. Webb shared. And so from a clinical perspective, one of the cool things about this is that your patients will notice right away, 90+% of the time are going to notice significant improvements. And so we've found in our home office that actually 90% of patients who come in and try this out buy a package on their first visit, because the process really sells itself. They're so pleased to find something that actually works like it's supposed to. One other way in which we've been able to apply this technology, and why the coordination, why some of these things matter, the sensory component feeds into neuroplasticity and some other things that they're able to go on. So this is the story of Amy here. Amy fell off a horse 25 years ago, broke her neck, had a spinal cord injury, and was paralyzed from her waist down. So for 25 years, she had not moved anything below her waist. She's been working with us. and the picture kind of spoils some of the story, but she worked first to regain some sensation, then some autonomic function in her legs. And now fast forward, after about 2 years of working with us, she's walking in a walker, she's on pace to being able to walk again, and it's been a really incredible story, a very inspirational story, and to me it speaks to that same power, that if we can tap into the potential that's within all of us, we can even make changes as dramatic as what we've seen there with Amy. And then ultimately, the proof is in the pudding is what I like to come back to. Those types of changes that we see all the time, had for years, that they thought they would always have. They love the fact that they can see changes very, very quickly. We have a lot of people recovering from surgeries, and we've been able to accelerate their recovery by 50 to 75%. So an example here, the gentleman on the left, he had surgery for his shoulder labrum, and our first session that we did after his surgery was 5 days post-op, and he, within the span of that session, increased his range of motion from the picture on the left to the picture on the right. So that range of motion there normally would take 3 to 5 weeks, and he got back in one session. So if we can take the first 3 to 5 weeks of rehab and compress it into one session, you can see how that extrapolates out to a much faster recovery process. Similarly here on the right, that is Trent Dilfer, former NFL quarterback and TV personality. He had a total knee replacement, and he came in to see us. It was already 3 weeks after his surgery, and so he was on the usual trajectory where he was still stiff, still in pain, not moving very well. In his first session, he gained 15 degrees of knee flexion. He was moving so much better, had so much less pain. He told his surgeon about it, and his surgeon even came in. And so now we're talking to him. He's the head of surgery at the Dell Med School at the University of Texas in Austin, and we're talking with him about putting together some research actually to start to explore some of these findings in the next level. A couple other examples here. So we've had our home office in Austin for 10 years. Just last fall, we've launched this where we have businesses all around the country that have started to use it, and here's some examples of what they're saying. So the gentleman on the left here working in Houston, he's talking about in 1 week, they've helped a woman regain shoulder range of motion from 90 degrees all the way up to full range of motion. In that same week, they helped someone with a dislocated ankle. They helped an 75-year-old man who had a knee replacement, whose knee was stuck at 80 degrees of flexion, get into a full squat. In that same week, they helped a few other things you can read here, but ending with a gym owner who they were able to loosen up his hamstrings to the point where he could touch his toes for the first time in several years. And he ends by saying, this tech is a game changer in the world of therapy, biohacking, and recovery. The one on the right here, a physical therapist in Tampa, he had been in practice for 22 years, has a great practice, has worked with a lot of athletes, speaks about how I can unequivocally say I've never discovered a modality or device that has had a more profound impact on improving human performance than the system we call NeuFit. He thinks it's going to positively impact the next generation in the profession of physical therapy. And these are the types of responses that we're seeing from people and the types of enthusiasm that we're getting from the folks who are using this around the country. So I hope that if this is at all interesting to you, you come by the booth. We have opportunities for you to try it out if you want. Even in a 5 or 10 minute demonstration, you can start to see what the process is like, get a sense of how it works, and learn something about hopefully what I think you'll see as a cool opportunity and something that could be a meaningful addition to your business. So thank you so much. I look forward to meeting you out there.